Okay. Okay, welcome everybody to this planning committee meeting of South Oxford City District Council. I'm Councillor David Brotherton. I'll be chairing this meeting. May I remind everyone this is a meeting in public and not a public meeting. Therefore, only members of the public who are registered to speak are allowed to do so. And I will call them to speak during the appropriate agenda item. This meeting is being held in our offices in Abbey House, Abingdon. Committee members are here in person, but officers and speakers are able to join remotely. The meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. The system allows councillors who are unable to attend in person to contribute to the meeting, but only councillors who are present in the room and hear the whole debate are allowed to vote. Procedural matters. The speakers and the members of the public who have logged in remotely, please ensure that your microphone is muted and that your camera is off for the duration of the meeting until you are called to speak. If you share a presentation on screen, please make sure that you stop sharing this when it is no longer needed. Planning committee is a decision-making committee of the council, and it is important that the set procedure is followed. All committee members have received a full report on each planning application. We will first hear from the planning officer, followed by the parish or town council, then objectors, supporters and local members. Each group will have 5 minutes to speak to the committee, after which members may ask questions of the group. The committee then asks questions of clarification of the planning officer. The committee will then debate and vote on each application. Councillors wishing to ask a question or participate in the debate are asked to indicate this by alerting myself or officers by raising a hand. Voting will be by show of hands. Members, please raise your hand clearly and keep it raised to allow a count to take place. If it is unclear how members are voting through a show of hands, I'll ask the clerk to undertake a roll call of those present and how they are voting. Few housekeeping arrangements. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to the right of this meeting room, and then go to assembly point 9 in the area outside beyond the fire exit. The domestic services officer will help you. Everyone, please ensure that their mobile phones are switched to silent or switched off during the meeting. Councillors and speakers in the room, please be aware the cameras and microphones are live for the duration of the meeting. May well pick up all things that I've said. Members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after their application has been debated are welcome to do so by the route previously mentioned. When the meeting is finished, I will ask for the confirmation that the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the meeting and make your way out of the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. That's the agenda. To get there. Agenda item 2 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence were received from Councillors Ben Manning, who is substituted for Councillor Georgina Heritage, and Councillor Tim Bearder.
Thank you. Minutes of the previous meeting to adopt and sign as a correct record of the planning committee minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of March 2024. Everybody clear that we can adopt those, please? Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, we have that proposer and seconder.
Proposer and seconder. Proposer, seconder. Thank you. All in favour? Thank you. Declaration of interest. To receive declaration of disclosable pecuniary interests, other registered interests and non-registered interests of any conflicts of interest in respect of items on the agenda for this meeting. I see none. Urgent business.
No urgent business.
No urgent business. Okay, public participation will occur at each agenda item. So we move to agenda item 7. Before we actually go the planning officer, I think Ms. Fox has a few words to say.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So members, just by way of background, we find ourselves in an unusual set of circumstances in relation to this first application. You'll remember that we have considered 2 applications on this site within the last 12 months. An appeal was lodged in respect of the first of those applications, and that appeal result was received the day after consideration of the second application. Having received that appeal decision, which was allowed, I took advice from our Legal and Democratic Service. I talked to the head of planning and also with our principal appeals officer who dealt with the appeal for us. And the conclusion was that we had to bring that second application back before you in the light of receiving that decision, because it constitutes a material planning consideration and an important one. So that's a bit of background for you as to why. Obviously, Andy will take you through the sort of salient points. I did ask the applicant, or we approached the applicant to say, did they still want a decision on this application? They confirmed they did, and it is their preferred scheme and the one that they wish to implement. So I will now hand over to Andy, who will just take them through the scheme. That's right.
Yeah, sorry, just add, of course, although the committee turned it down at the meeting, the notice was going to be issued the following day, but it wasn't issued because the planning appeal came in. So the notice was never issued of that decision of the planning committee.
So it was a resolution, rather.
So it's a resolution to do that, but it never actually happened. That's why we're here now. Yeah. I don't think we need to go right through it all, but I've asked Andy to explain the differences between the two schemes. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, the morning after the planning committee, we received the appeal decision, which officers feel is significant weight on the committee's decision the night before. To summarise the appeal decision, it is contained in the packs, but I'll just go through a few points for you. The inspector acknowledged the pub had consistently operated at a loss, which was likely due to the small population of West Hagbourne and the high level of competition in the area. The inspector considered that significant investment would likely be necessary whether the premises were to operate as a pub or as an alternative community use. In reaching his decision, he concluded that there was no substantive evidence to indicate that such additional enterprises are likely to be forthcoming or that they would be profitable. The inspector considered that given the lack of any substantive evidence, potential offers, combined with the limited number of objections to the proposal, there was not extensive community support or market demand for the retention of the pub. The inspector concluded that the pub was no longer a viable enterprise. The applicants confirmed, as Paula mentioned, is their preferred option that they wish to develop. The only difference between this application and the previous refused application is that the proposed dwellings on plots 4 and 5 have one more bedroom, which therefore results in a slight increase in floor space. I've emphasised that this is significant weight in terms of the appeal decision. In light of the appeal decision, our principal planning appeals officer has advised officers they would not be able to defend a reason for refusal based on the previous committee at appeal. The application is therefore referred back to reconsider the previous resolution. The officer made recommendations for approval, subject to the conditions that are listed in Appendix 5 of the pack. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, I've no registered speakers, so we'll go straight back to the officer for questions. I've got one question for you. You said it was plots 4 and 5. Could you point out which are plots 4 and 5?
Yeah, of course. Just get the...
If we get the picture back up again. Sorry, I'm being awkward on
it. So I'll see it very clear. Do you mind if I just go?
No, you can.
Yeah. Show you.
I can see it now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the two on the car park.
These two. Slight increase in space. Probably worthwhile mentioning that it wouldn't constitute, for example, it wouldn't constitute a minor material change. So a full application would be required. They couldn't, for example, submit a variation of the now approved appeal application. Yeah. We would need to notify neighbours if you were minded to suggest that an alternative manner amendments.
Yeah, I mean that was a thought why they not put an amendment in. Yeah, and they were advised that they couldn't do that. It had to be a full application. An amendment. It was too big a change for it to be an amendment. Yeah. Okay. So we're now back to questions for the officer. Has anybody got any questions for the officer? think we all understand why we're here. Yeah, okay. There's no questions. I'll look for a motion. I'm going to propose the motion. I'm going to propose officer's recommendation. I'm looking for a seconder. Oh, Catherine. Okay, thank you. Okay. Is there any debate? Yes, Cam.
Yeah. I think, Chairman, we should note the appeal decision, which we've got a copy of here. And I think when you read the inspector's report, I think he does actually support the committee in a number of items that we put forward for reviews as you walk through it, about the CF one for a prime example. And also, when you look at this, you've got, I think, about 24 conditions on this application. You know, normally on a reasonable application, you might get 7 or 8 conditions, but this is exceptional. And so I think I can quite easily see how the committee came to its decision on the first one and also on the one last week. But what I did like out of this decision, there were no application for the application for costs. There were no costs granted against the council. So as I say, when you read the inspector's report, I think it just slightly, and I think it only slightly goes in favour of the applicant. I think it could have quite easily gone the other way. So I don't think, as a committee, we have anything to worry about. I think we made a decision last week on the information in front of us. I think it's the first one I've ever voted against Andy, and obviously it didn't go too well on my part, so I must apologise, Andy. You got this one right again. So as I said, I think the committee has made reasonable decisions on both the applications, and as I say, looking at the appeal, I think it could have quite easily gone the other way. And I still believe that I think if a decent landlord would have gone in there, they could have made a go at this. But obviously we've got the appeal decision, and we've really got nowhere to go other than support this application in front of us tonight.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Anyone else? I should have gone to Catherine to second this speech, but I'll come back to you.
Right.
Okay, Councillor James Lorry.
Nothing really has changed from the decision that was made last time. I still believe it is financially viable enterprise if it was run properly. I don't understand really why I understand why it's come back to us, but this hasn't changed my mind or my opinion on this. I think the inspectorate is wrong, and I certainly will not support the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Gordon-Green.
I think I echo what Councillor Arlett said, that the pub, I question the viability, all the viability element of the reports, because they're based on a premise to do with numbers versus community and people, and I just wanted on record that I feel really sad that our policy that is clear about keeping community, at least a community building within a community, is deliberately, almost, it seems, we have no choice to get rid of the one remaining community building in this community that felt isolated from their one community building because of how it was being run, and that is the feedback we've had, and I feel really sad about that. Just having that on record, and I understand we don't have a choice, but it doesn't mean that our hearts weren't in the right place with regards to the decisions we made.
Councillor Sadler.
Just one point really about the one of the reasons we made the decision we did was because it was pointed out that Upton Pub was within walking distance of this one, and therefore villagers could actually go to Upton Pub quite easily. And the inspector did actually make the point that the community actually have met in the Upton Pub, choosing that rather than this pub. So I think that's quite telling. But there was a question about the sustainability of Upton Pub as well, in that might well go. So that was part of our decision making for this one. So it wasn't just we were against this, but it was about that community help piece being available. And if it goes at Upton, then of course then it really has got to.
That's the case you're in.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all think it's a real shame that they're losing this, and I think it's a lesson that maybe district councillors can take away to work with their parish councillors to get assets of community value registered and work hard on that, because it's obviously something that parish council and district councillors probably should have done here and they didn't. So that's a real lesson to be learned.
Okay, thank you. Susan?
The inspector picked up that our current local plan, the policy CF1 states that proposals that result in the loss of an essential community facility will not be permitted. I just point out that in the Reg 18 on the new local plan, the Green Group has suggested that the word essential be taken out of that policy. So it's the proposals that result in the loss of community facilities will not be permitted. But this word essential is one that is entirely subjective, and it can be used to lose community facilities.
Yeah.
So there we are.
Yeah, okay. I think Councillor Keatswell.
Yeah, I thank you. I never was in any doubt what we would need to do tonight, but I think the points I was going to make have all been said one way or another. I don't think the report has in any sense, found us at fault as such in our reasoning. We wanted to preserve this community asset, give the community a chance. I must admit, I was not very confident that this particular parish council had it within it to do it, but I felt it deserved another chance. And I do think it's very much the case that we should be encouraging parishes to be proactive. It can be done. There are plenty of examples where it has been done very successfully. It is a real shame that we are where we are. But we are where we are, and we have to accept officers' recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Committee. Thank you. I think we're all know where we stand. And thank you for all your kind words, and particularly, I think this policy tweak might well have not got us here. Yeah, I might change the situation. Right, we'll go for the votes. All those in favour of the proposal, which is to accept Robert's recommendation, all those please show. 2, 3, 4. Sorry, that's 6. Yeah. Against? 1. Abstentions? 3. Okay. I think that shows how the committee feel. Thank you then. Okay. Hopefully that's resolved it. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to agenda item 8. So the Glendale Barn, Glendale Farm, North End. The planning officer is Tom Wyatt. Tom, will you take us through this? Okay.
The application was deferred from the previous planning committee, as you know, to allow a site visit, which took place yesterday afternoon. Members on the site visit will have noted the position of the barn in the countryside between North End and Christmas Common and close to the Buckinghamshire border. The site lies within the Chilterns National Landscape. The main part of the barn, including the section relating to the application, was erected over 20 years ago. The certificate of lawful use was granted last year for an existing dwelling within the end 1.5 days of the barn. The certificate was granted on the basis that the dwelling had been present for more than 4 years. So the current application seeks planning permission to extend that residential use into an adjoining section of the barn is no longer required for agricultural use. One of the key considerations is the impact of the development on the rural character and appearance of the surrounding area, particularly having regard to the site's location within the national landscape. Members on the site visit will have noted the site's position in relation to other nearby dwellings within the vicinity and the views from the rights of way crossing the fields to the east and west of the site at over 200 metres from the site. So just a reminder, this is from the footpath to the west of the site. You can see the back of the barn there, and there's some hedging or some sparse hedging on the boundary, you'll remember. This is a view from the other footpath for those members who didn't see this view. You can just see the roof of the barn in the distance, just over the top of the hedge in the foreground. So given the presence of the existing dwelling, the retention of the agricultural form and character of the building, the use of sympathetic facing materials, I do not consider that the landscape qualities of the national landscape would be harmed by the proposal. However, if members consider it necessary, it is possible to limit the impact on the landscape further through additional conditions, including a requirement to retain and provide any new planting. The application is recommended for approval as set out in the report.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, I'll register speakers for this. Bill Bindoff, who's a representative of Watlington Parish Council.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jill. You have your 5 minutes from the moment you start speaking.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you again. As I mentioned last time, I chair Watlington Parish Council's Planning Committee, and I'm here to explain why the Parish Council has strong objections to this application. The Parish Council is very pleased that you agreed to make a visit to the site before making a decision, and we hope that you found that helpful. As you know, the Parish Council's main objection is that the proposed development will result in harm to the character and quality of the national landscape, because it will result in residential encroachment into the countryside in an area where the agricultural character contributes very importantly to the area's rural natural appearance. The encroachment is not only from the dwelling, but also from all the domestic features which inevitably go with it, with the garden and seating, sunshade, barbecue, play equipment, etc., plus all the additional car parking and bins. All this in an area which is designated for its natural beauty and where great weight is given nationally and locally to its protection. All development here should result in an enhancement of the site and its surroundings. But in this case, there is no enhancement of any kind which could outweigh the harm. Not only harm to the national landscape, harm to the natural environment, harm to dark skies, and harm to the wider environment. There's no contribution to nature recovery, only loss of habitat to provide a garden area for the dwelling. The impact of artificial light at night from light spill and external lighting is known to harm nocturnal wildlife, including moths and bats. And there will be harm to the environment generally, because all the occupants of the dwelling will be car dependent, generating vehicle emissions and particulates. There are no practical alternative ways to access necessary services and facilities. And of course, there will be all the usual deliveries of online orders, etc. The development in this location is simply not sustainable. Although the application is described as an extension, there is no existing main dwelling. As the barn stands, there is no visual appearance of an established dwelling occupying the end bay, as you will have seen on the site visit. The visual impact of the conversion of 3 bays of the barn into a 2-storey, 3-bedroom house will be entirely new. Your policy for extensions refers to your joint design guide, which says that extensions should ensure that the original building remains the visually dominant element of the property, and the Watlington design guide includes the same approach. And this is clearly not the case here. It's reasonable, therefore, to assess the visual impact of the whole of the development
because it will appear as a totally new dwelling. There are clear similarities between this application and the one at Grove Farm in Watlington Parish, where the planning inspector has recently upheld the SODC refusal of planning permission and dismissed the applicant's appeal. The judgment on the impact of the development is fundamentally the same here and is not affected by the fact that residential occupation of one end of Glendale Barn has recently been deemed to be lawful. It's the impact of the proposed substantial conversion of the barn into the two-storey, three-bedroom house which is relevant. If, nevertheless, you decide to approve the application this evening, please at least make sure that conditions discussed at the last meeting to reduce the impact of light pollution are attached. Namely, there should be no changes to the proposed windows to be carried out without the permission of the planning authority, and that automatic blinds are used to cover the roof lights at night, as offered at the last meeting by the agent. Of course, the Parish Council hopes that you share its objections and will refuse this application. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Committee, are there any questions for Linda? See none, so thank you very much for your time. Okay, next speaker is, he's already there. Henry Benners, who's the agent. 5 minutes when you first start talking.
Thank you, committee. My start point here will be the Watlington Neighbourhood Plan, which has been referred to. Policy P3 of which is about conserving and enhancing the natural environment. It's got 5 criteria, the 5th of which says E, good design limits the impact of light pollution from artificial light on the area surrounding the development. So the policy doesn't say there shall be no light. It says that good design shall be used to limit the impact of any light pollution. We'll come back to that later because I remember to bring some, hopefully they'll be able to be displayed some images about the timber fins which are proposed to go across some of the windows. Who's in control of the images? We don't need them yet, so it's images 10 and 11 if you wouldn't mind, please. In my view, we've actually striven very hard to come up with a good design for this site. As you'll be aware from the site visit, it's not an ordinary house. If you look at it, I quite take the point of the previous speaker, it doesn't look like a house. Therefore, the advice in the design guide that the house should remain the dominant element when you come to extend it doesn't really apply to this. The design guide doesn't really contemplate an original dwelling that is quite like this, that happens to be on the end of a barn. So we've taken it as a unique proposal and come up with a unique solution to it, but tried to keep the essence of the building as a barn, and rather than extend the building even further by going forwards or backwards or out to the right as you look from the front of the building, we've gone to the left into what are currently redundant bays of the building. I'm not sure whether all of you visited the site, but I also took some photographs. If we could show the long range photos. Well, that's the image from the roadside. The one before shows if you just move slightly to the side of the gate, the roadside hedge is quite an effective block to the existing building. The long distance views from the footpaths, which Mr. White said were over 200 metres away, show that there are already quite a few hedges in the way. My client is, however, quite willing to carry out additional landscaping. When you stood in front of the barn, you might have seen behind you there's a row of trees at the moment which provide high level screening, but there could be a hedge planted there as well. So if the committee was so minded, a landscaping condition, in addition to the no alteration of windows and in addition to the other condition which was discussed about a scheme to limit the impact of artificial light, would be acceptable to the applicant as well. And I think in combination all those things would ensure a perfectly satisfactory extended dwelling. Some of the comments of the previous speaker about this being an entirely unacceptable place for a house are rather a red herring, given that the house is already here. The travel is already going to come to and from this property. This is an application for not for a new house, but for an extension to an existing house. And I would also add on that the existing house could be altered It could have additional windows added to all of the elevations and also to the roof under permitted development rights. But Mr. Wyatt's suggestion of a removal of a condition for Class A permitted development rights would take that away from the existing house and from the extension when that was done. So you could be ensured of quality, and thereby it would also comply with the Children's Building Design Guide, which suggests that you don't radically alter the appearance of a building, that the extensions reflect the design of the original building. You retain existing openings and limit the number of new openings, and do not break roof slopes with dormer windows or roof lights. That's the Children's Building Design Guide. We've done everything we possibly can to come up with a good design, and I hope you would agree that it is suitable.
Okay, back to, yeah, okay, committee, has anybody got any questions? There's no questions, so thank you very much, Ms. Fenners. Right, I haven't seen the local ward member or heard from him, so we'll go back to questions for the opposite, questions for Tom. I'm sure somebody will want a question about the light and the conditions for the light. So which one's going to put that question? Peter.
Well, my question was around the site proposed encompasses the area in front of the barn as far as and north to the road. So that's all of that area. There's going to become domestic curtilage, is it, Tom?
Yes, I mean, it'd be it's part of the garden essentially at the moment of the existing dwelling. As you saw on site, it's basically a lawned area, and there's barns at the front of it where the parking is shown on the plan, site plan going forward. So that would be the main sort of garden area.
Can I ask a further question?
Yes.
Will there be any constraint on the applicant creating a new entrance to the remaining barn with the fields, which I understand when this is also in his ownership?
I mean, there's a perfectly good entrance there.
Yeah, but it's going to be lawned. You just said it's going to be lawned and domestic curtilage.
It would. You mean from very much adjacent to the existing? I mean, it is. Again, I don't know if the road is classified or not. It's not.
It's a B road.
If it's a B road, as you say, that they'll need planning permission to create new exit.
Right. So the existing access to the remaining industrial use at the back will become through this domestic curtilage.
I mean, it's not. There's the end bay of the barn has it's being used as a workshop. I understand that didn't need planning permission. If it's up to 150 square meters, you can just do that in a barn like this without the council having any say.
Sure.
It's a very small scale. It's up to 150 square meters. Otherwise, the remaining part of the barn will remain in agricultural use. So I don't believe there's any conflict there, and the existing dwelling is already there. So any conflict already exists in any case.
Yes, but at the moment the existing dwelling is in the barn, isn't it? It's in the barn. It's not.
Well, this would be in the barn too.
Sorry? Yeah,
the extended dwelling would be just taking up more of the barn. So
yeah, I think Peter's point is that my drawing is not in colour, but the side boundary covers more than the barn. It covers the whole area at the front, and how could you restrict that usage of that? They're going to then be able to. Well, just seems to be more than what's the dwelling is. That's the site boundary on our plan.
Yeah, and you'd expect it to have a garden area, and it includes the access as you would need to as part of that. It doesn't exclude the use of that access through that.
Yeah,
sites. We have to access it back. The existing part of the barn at the rear.
Yeah, you'll propose a condition to remove permitted development rights. Are you?
There is a condition on the recommendation to remove Class A permitted development rights, which relates to extensions and alterations for the dwelling.
Yeah.
I don't believe we need. You can remove other permitted development rights like Class E, which relates to outbuildings, things like that. But here, a bit of land between the barn and the road, you would need planning permission for any outbuildings anyway, just because of the way the legislation is worded. So I don't think it's necessary to do that.
I'll go back. There's some questions over here. Councillor Heritage.
Okay, I was going to ask about conditions regarding the artificial light and so on. I might come back to that or let somebody else ask that. But I so something I picked up because I've got a huge level of sympathy with the parish council. Although I accept there are already permissions to this property as a residence, it's very difficult for us to argue that there shouldn't be a residence here when there is already a permission in existence. So what I wanted to ask was, I did pick up on the point that if this is an extension, how has it been justified as an extension when the original residential part of the building will certainly not be dominant to the new works?
As the agent saying, it's very unusual, it's a unique case. I mean, I don't think we've come across a situation where a barn has been converted without planning permission, become lawful, and then they want to expand further into it. So I don't think it's not a situation where I think you can say, the normal design guide considerations in terms of your standard 2-story house and an extension should have a lower ridge, should have setbacks to make sure the original house stands out. I don't think it really applies to this situation. The barn is already there.
Yeah, I understand that.
So they're not changing the envelope of the form of the building in terms of its dimensions and where it is. So.
Okay, Councillor Gordon Green.
So for me, I would want to, if we were to find it in favour of this, and I struggle to know on what grounds we refuse, to add some planting conditions with regards to screening, particularly making sure that hedge at the back stays, so that there isn't a visual impact. Making sure we have a lighting mitigation that doesn't allow, that appreciates the dark sky policy, that isn't compliant with dark sky policy, and we don't have there isn't a net gain element to this, is there? So it's just screening impact on landscape. So what I don't know is that the paddock in front, as the agent said, there are trees currently along that fence, which are, the visibility from the other footpath is very minimal. So I don't think to add conditions to plant there, I don't think they're necessary at the moment, but certainly condition to maintain the hedge behind it feels really important, because that then would.
Yeah, I would agree. So
yeah.
Could we condition that?
Yeah, I mean, we can put a landscaping condition on the required details of new planting and to include the retention of existing planting, and particularly make reference to the boundary hedging. I mean, could be supplemented. It's a little bit gappy, so maybe there's a chance to improve it a bit as well, and to keep it at a certain height going forward.
Yeah.
So that can be easily achieved.
Also, Casey Renner.
On the site visit, we talked about conditioning for sort of interior blinds and that, and I think we decided we couldn't really do that. But the agent talked about the VLATs for the roof light windows having automatic blinds. Is that something that you can't really condition?
Well, I think it's difficult, to be honest. I mean, conditions have to pass various tests.
Yeah.
Laid out by the government, and includes they need to be capable of being enforced and monitored, and it's very difficult, I think, to do a situation where you're relying on people making blinds. I'm sure you maybe get blinds that do sort of shut automatically on a time or something. But you know, we don't want our enforcement team to be sort of constantly phoned up saying their blinds aren't down at midnight or whatever. It'd be very difficult to enforce. So I think, I mean, there are other solutions that may be more practical, such as certain type of glass coating that we do impose as conditions, which is a film on the glass that can limit to a degree the amount of light that escapes out to the windows. But I think the design of the dwelling with the use of timber fins and what have you, and in combination with the permitted development, the restriction on altering the windows and new windows would go a long way to limit light pollution. And as the agent said, the existing dwelling they could effectively turn it into a glass box pretty much without planning permission.
But at the moment, we don't have a condition on the use of that film for the windows. Maybe it's just about the external lighting. But we could add that.
That could be added at your discretion.
Okay, any further questions?
One further question. Tom, in what way does this, you said this was in the national landscape. What way does this serve and enhance the national landscape?
Well, it's the we have a general duty to have regard to the conservation and enhancement of the national landscape. I think not every scheme has to enhance. I think it should conserve, and I think the limited impact of this in terms of use on receptors, as on the footpaths and the road, etc. And given that there's an existing dwelling there and the barn is already there, I think, in my opinion, it conserves the national landscape. But there's no, agree, there's not an enhancement, but I think when you look at the fallback position of existing dwelling there and being able to having its full permitted development rights intact and what they could do there, the planning permission will enable landscaping, at your discretion to result in some improvement to the immediate setting of the building. So I think the overall balance from my point of view is that it conserves the national landscape and certainly that's from my point of view.
That's your opinion.
I wouldn't feel comfortable trying to defend and appeal arguing harm to the national landscape in respect of this application.
Okay.
So can I just clarify a question with Tom, that if we refuse their permitted development that they currently have because the house is in existence, even though we don't like that, we would have loved to them to have done it regularly, they could do whatever they liked. So this is them, regularizing things. It's a chance for us to have some mitigation on impact.
We'd have control over the whole planning unit, which includes the existing dwelling.
Yeah.
Through this, so it's not. So the existing situation, we have a dwelling that has no conditions attached to it at all. It's established because it's been there for long enough to be immune from enforcement, and they have a full suite of permitted development rights on that dwelling. So this would have the benefit of taking the existing rate into our control for future alterations. So it's obviously a balance between bending the dwelling into 2 more bays and having that extra control over what they can do in the future.
Thank you.
Right, thank you, committee. I think we're questioned out. I can get the feeling that it's not the only ones that come to committee are the difficult ones, and this is a difficult one. Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking for a proposal, please. I'm going to go to Catherine. Okay, Catherine.
Thank you. Well, I propose we accept it. I actually think there's several very positive things about this. I don't actually have a problem with people wanting to live in the place where they work. I think you've already got a dwelling here. They want to make it slightly bigger. There's a very nice design that actually will improve the look of what's there at the moment. I can't actually see any good reason why we wouldn't accept it.
Okay, before we go into debate, I need a seconder. Do you have a seconder? Councillor Arlott, thank you. Just speak now, Ken.
Oh, I'll wait.
You'll wait. Okay, right. I'll let you carry on, Catherine. Or have you finished? I'll come back to you when we have the debate.
What's the gist of it? I think it's, as I say, I just can't see a problem with what's happened. And as I say, I think the design has gone the extra mile to be as sympathetic and as helpful as it can be in terms of visual amenity. And, as I say, I just think they've done everything possible and they are very open to the extra conditions.
Yes, okay. I'll open the debate. Is there any debate? Councillor Heritage.
I would only say that I can see a problem. However, I just want to state my view really that I think a lot of us can see problems with it. I was at the site visit yesterday. There's a lot that I'm not comfortable with the process, but I would say that ultimately there is nothing. It's a lawful development, and I don't see a material objection to it, whatever my gut instinct might be.
I think that will occupy a few people. But any further debate? Councillor Sadler.
I can see that as a technicality, there's nothing we can do apart from approve it. I accept the fact I went and did the viewing yesterday myself. And I accept the fact that you're away from pathways, that it's a long distance from those pathways to see the building in question. I think the design is very nice, but it still comes back to the fact that this is development by stealth, and it's just. I mean, it's not a pleasant way to do stuff, and we shouldn't. I got elected to represent the people of Chinham. It's not not to just go and follow a process because that's what we're told to do, and it feels wrong. This does. It feels completely wrong that they're allowed to do this. So I'm against it for that reason, and I realise that that's not a material ground.
Yeah, Councillor Dragonelli.
Well, it's the material grounds are that it doesn't enhance or conserve the national landscape, and the we had a planning application just a few miles away, which was recommended by officers for approval, and the previous committee to this one turned it down, and the inspectors agreed with the committee against the officer's recommendation that the development for residential development in the A and B just a couple of miles away should be refused because it didn't conserve and enhance the national landscape. And this barn which was built, I would say less than 20 years or so ago, and this sort of authorised development at the end we all saw sort of cunningly concealed, so you can't see it from the road, and it doesn't look like a dwelling from the outside. It's got sort of steel doors all around it, and it's all all over the Chilterns. There are barns like that which are there eligible, which are people are moving into and living in, and in 4 years, then you then get a wonderful executive home, which is fine for somebody to live in the Chilterns, but it's not. It's what the planning system is supposed to be about, not allowing, not permitting national landscapes to be degraded in this way through developments. And this is sort of grandmother's footsteps to how to create adverse development and to destroy these national landscapes. And as I say, the inspectors have found against a lot of developments in the Chilterns over the recent ever since I've been elected. I keep note of all the inspectors' decisions, and very rarely do inspectors approve developments in the AONB as was. So I think this is a significant development, and we should refuse it and let the planning inspectorate make take their decision on it.
Okay. Right, Councillor Casey.
Well, I understand that this is a significant increase in volume of living area, I have to say that part of the point of a lawful certificate of dwelling, common it's called development, means has come about because no one's objected to it, so no one's noticed it. So I take into account that the light pollution can't be that big, even though what we're looking at is an extension, and it's going to be therefore an extension of light and more activity. I do feel that the parish council are now objecting to it, but they didn't object to it when it was turned into a dwelling, so it can't have that a bigger impact on the area. So and I just feel that if it's done with those conditions, and I would suggest we have a condition of the special glass. So the biggest issue with this is light pollution as well as the activity of people coming and going. We know this area, there's no public transport and all that sort of stuff. There will be cars. However, the dwelling is there, and it may have an increase in number of car movements because it's a bigger dwelling, but we have to take that into account that there is already a dwelling there. I just don't see how we could object to it really. And if we can get the conditions in place and the landscaping and the light, then I think this would be a sympathetic development actually.
Okay, thank you. I think I'll go back to Councillor Arnott, who seconded this motion.
Yeah, just quickly, Chairman, I think the first comes to mind is, the question harm. Is there any harm? And to be honest, there is no harm, not that I can see, on this application. Councillor Dragonetti mentions about destroying the national landscape. Well, to be honest, this doesn't destroy the national landscape. I see the building's already there. And one would have to accept actually refurbishment or whatever you want to call it is going to make it better rather than worse. So in theory, it probably does enhance if we like it or not. I honestly can't see any reason or any good reason. The only thing I would go back to what I started at the start of the meeting with the application, the first one that we passed, we had about 24 conditions to it. This one's got 5. Which probably tells you the story. There's probably not too much wrong with it. So I would definitely support the application.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Arnott. I'll go back to Councillor Keats Rowan to sum up.
Well, I've said already, and Councillor Arnott just said I don't really feel I have much more to add. I cannot see a reason to reject it, any good reason, and I can see every reason to accept it. I do take the point that none of us particularly likes development. Myself, we are annoyed about, but I just don't think that that's not something that we can make an argument on. I think what's before us is worthy of accepting the officer's recommendation. I think what we should do.
Okay, thank you. Just before we go to the vote, I'm just going to go back to Tom to clarify on the conditions, because the one on landscaping is not on our list.
No, so just to clarify, there were 2 extra conditions that we discussed. One was the landscaping, so new planting, retention of existing, and the second was a mechanism. I think we need to look at that without sort of maybe being too prescriptive at the moment, but a mechanism to reduce the light emission. So it could include film on glazing, for example, but there could be other measures that are more practical. So that is something that we need to agree.
And then
There'll be an extra condition to go.
the external lighting as well.
External lighting is there already.
It's already there.
Yeah. It's the internal lighting, how you restrict it. I don't think it's got enough information to actually write it down at the moment, but it will be there.
Okay.
Yeah, if we're happy with that. Yeah, okay. All right, so we'll go to a vote. All those in favour of the proposal to accept this application, please show.
7.
1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. All against? 3. Okay, that one is passed. Right, I'm just going to get this off some water. Anybody else wants to 2 minutes?
For those online, we're taking a quick comfort break and we'll be back soon.
Right, so we'll move on. Thank you. Move on to agenda item 9, land at Newtown Road, Henley on Thames.
No, it's not. I'm sorry.
It's Paul. Go on.
Thank you, Chair. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of a terrace of 4 dwellings on Newtown Road in Henley. Your officers consider that the principle of development in relation to infilling with new build dwellings is supported in this settlement by Local Plan Policy H1 and Neighbourhood Plan Policy H4, and also the fallback planning permission for residential development for 2 dwellings, as discussed at paragraphs 7.2 to 7.3 of the report. As outlined in paragraphs 7.4 to 7.9 of the report, your officers consider that the scale, form and detailing of the proposed dwellings would relate to their surroundings, and the inspector found the previous application for a similar design to be acceptable. Your officers consider that the interrelationship between the proposed plots and their neighbours would be acceptable in respect of light, outlook and privacy, sufficient to have addressed the inspector's concerns with the previous scheme, as covered in paragraph 7.10 to 7.14 of the report. In the expert opinion of the local highway authority, the proposed access and parking arrangements would not give rise to conditions prejudicial to highway and pedestrian safety, in compliance with Local Plan Policy Trans 5. Your officers consider the proposed mix of market housing to be acceptable. Matters relating to drainage, tree and hedge protection, landscaping, protected species, energy reduction and external lighting could be dealt with through the recommended conditions. Your officers consider that the application would comply with the relevant development plan policies, and on that basis it is recommended that planning permission is granted. And you'll see just coming up on the screen here, the next, I think it's the very next slide that you're going to get, that scheme there, you can see that is the appeal scheme. So the key differences are that you're now considering 4 units, whereas the previous scheme was 3. The 4 are set slightly further back, and the plots are deeper, so they go into the gardens of the plots behind. So they've been absorbed by the development. So rather than overlooking those gardens, which was the key concern of the inspector, those views now are into their own gardens. So I hope that helps to identify the similarities and differences between the 2, and that's the design, the elevations of the previous scheme. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Whilst he's still there, before we go to the speakers, you should have all received your set of drawings this morning. Aside, yeah, as the ones in the report are a waste of time, absolute waste of time. Yeah, and I think hopefully Paul is going to take steps to try and stop that happening again, because you couldn't have determined it on those drawings. It just didn't make sense. Oh, right. 2 speakers. One is Tom Buckley, who's the representative of Henley on Thames Town Council, and the other one, Neil Davies, who I think is here. Yeah, we'll go to Tom Buckley first.
Good evening. How are we?
Evening.
Good to see us again.
Good to see you. Thank you.
I'll be very quick on this. Henley Town Council has seen this a couple of times. We've tried to push back as often as we can. This area is essentially part of the Henley employment zone. The surrounding area is garages. Yes, there's some old terraced houses, 100-year-old terraced houses on Reading Road. That area, Newtown Road, is essentially employment. It is a Regis office, there's a tyre fitting company, there's a garage, there's some businesses, and at the top of this road they would like to build and squeeze in, I will use the terms squeeze in, 4 houses. Now, in principle, there is no issue with terracing of houses. We have a small amount of space. I appreciate what they're trying to do. However, the scale of the housing and the closeness, not just to the neighbours, but in and of themselves, it's in this day and age, it is not what we're trying to do in Henley. We're trying to provide affordable housing. This is terracing, which will give us some smaller houses, which is what we need, but the space is very, very small. We're trying to put in, there was plan permission given for 2 houses originally. They then tried for 3 houses. They've pulled it together, they've squeezed them back, they've pushed back into the land, they've complied with policies as much as they can do, but it is still overdevelopment and unneighbourly to try and put 4 houses into the area of 2 potentially. So from that perspective, we're pushing back, we're saying no. There's comments in the planning application as well that say there, because the council hasn't got 5 years land supply. Well, in Henley, we actually do have 5 years land supply, as far as I'm aware. I appreciate SODC might be seen differently, but in Henley, and according to our neighbourhood plan, we have land supply. We have highlighted areas in our neighbourhood plan for development. This is not one of them. I'm trying to squeeze in, as I said before, 4 flats. You saw yourself in the drawings, and the drawings are going to make it look good, but those apartments will be very, very thin. They will be very small, and there will be very little room. And then you look at how they are put together with the flats, the existing terraced houses in Reading Road. So suddenly we've gone from 4 to 6 terraced houses with a bit of garden, and then we're going to squeeze another 4 in at the end. I'm not going to say any more than, there was planning permission for 2. They're now trying to put 4 in. This shouldn't really be allowed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Buckley.
Nice and quick.
Anybody got any questions for? Yeah, yes, Councillor Reganelli.
We're saying that these houses are very small. Better insulation and better materials, and are going to be better houses than the Victorian ones.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
But we've also seen where aspirations and delivery do not come together. 4 houses in an area that size is overdevelopment, pure and simple. Added to the fact that this is the employment zone, this is where we're trying to build out industry, well, the light industry that we need in Henley. There are a number of other places that you could build this. That's it, really.
Okay.
That's the rationale on which Henley Town Council have pushed back and said that is not suitable for that area.
Okay, thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to Neil Davies, who is the planning agent. Okay, welcome. You have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak. By way of background and as set out within the officer report, there are 2 important decisions on this site already, which are material to how this proposal before members tonight should be considered. Firstly, the original appeal decision for 2 dwellings granted in 2019 and now considered to be extant and partially implemented for the approval of a lawful development certificate in 2022. And secondly, the dismissal at appeal of a proposal for 3 dwellings in 2023, solely on the grounds that the depth of the proposed gardens would be inadequate, thereby harming the amenities of the occupants, on number 305 Reading Road by way of loss of privacy. All other aspects of amenity were considered to be acceptable, including the impact on numbers 303 and 307 Reading Road. There were no concerns raised in regard to the impact on the character and appearance of the area. Members will note that the building on the opposing corner of Newtown Road, which was formerly in commercial use, is now used entirely for residential apartments. The proposal before you tonight offers additional benefits over and above the extant permission, which officers agree is a relevant fallback position. Firstly, the front building line is set further away from Newtown Road, providing more space for soft planting, which will enhance the current street scene, which is dominated by hard surfacing and fencing. This point is noted in the officer report. Secondly, the quality and location of the amenity space is much improved, as it will site the gardens to the rear as opposed to being to the side adjacent to Newtown Road. The gardens are all appropriate in size, depth and location, and much improved when compared against the extant permission. Thirdly, it will provide for additional housing within the urban area of Henley, close to shops and public transport modes, which is exactly the location encouraged by the government in the framework. In fact, the framework makes it clear that it's particularly important to make efficient use of urban brownfield land where the proposal is meeting an identified need for housing. Members will note from the officer report that the housing mix proposed, which is 2 and 3 bed dwellings, is in general conformity with the latest SHMA. The applicant has responded positively to all of the consultancy responses since the application was lodged, including providing additional information in respect to trees and drainage. All consultees are now fully supportive and there are no objections lodged by members of the public. Just dealing with a couple of points that have been raised by the town council. Firstly, obviously it is acknowledged that this is an employment site, but we have an extant permission which is there already, and that is to develop the same site area. So that's not considered to be relevant. Secondly, mention was made of the proximity of the dwellings to the neighbouring properties on Reading Road. This development is materially no different to that extant permission, to the appeal decision rather, which was found by the inspector to be acceptable in that respect. And thirdly, in terms of the quality of these houses, each of them meets the national standards, which sets minimum size and matters to do with outlook. So therefore, in summary, we believe that this application should be supported and approved with the conditions recommended by officers. Just to repeat, really, that the site has an extant permission for housing, which is effectively a fallback position and capable of being completely built out. It will make a positive contribution to the environmental, social and economic objectives of planning, which will benefit the local area enormously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Davis. Committee, any questions to Mr. Davis? Councillor Arnott.
Yeah, I note this application now goes into the gardens of 305, 307 and 309, which one would imagine they're not giving the land away. One would imagine they're selling the land. Do you think that's the reason why they're not objecting to this application?
Well, I don't comment on that. I'm sorry, but there aren't any objections. Just at that point.
Thank you. No further questions. So thank you very much, Mr. Davis.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Did you have one?
Yeah, Councillor Arnott.
You mentioned that it complies with the national NNPF's minimal. Are these the minimal? Are they the minimal size and standard?
Well, it was to say that they comply with the nationally prescribed space standards for dwellings. I haven't got the exact figures in front of me, but they are compliant with 2 and 3 bed dwellings. It's probably on the plan I've got here somewhere. Let's see. 115 square meters.
Makes sense of those dimensions.
You've got plot schedule unit 1, ground floor 61, second floor 54, over 115. That's the largest.
I'll reserve that question for the officer in a moment.
Sorry.
Yeah. There's Paul up there, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. We have one ward councillor here. As you wish to speak as ward councillor? No, thank you very much. We'll go back then to the planning officer, Paul. Paul Lucas.
Yep. Hello. Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, so just a quick one, just to confirm that on the 3 beds, units 1 and 4, that actually the garden space is slightly below the minimum. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah, it's between 5 and 10 square meters below the 100 square meters recommended minimum standard. However, in sustainable locations such as this, it would be very difficult for the council to justify refusing planning permission for a shortfall of that sort. We would think we would really struggle to be able to defend that successfully at an appeal. I think the case it's been some time since the council tried to do that. I was an appeal officer at one point, couple of decades ago, I think, and we were unsuccessful a couple of times then, and you know, so we certainly haven't tried to do that when the shortfall is like that in this type of location.
Appreciate it, thank you.
Paul, was you private to the conversation on size of the properties? It's gone.
Yes, I'm trying to look up. I have got the information saved, but we had the email migration, so it sort of moved everything around. So I'm just having to. You can bear with me. I will try and find, because I had to salvage it and keep it somewhere. I have got the details, but I'm just trying to find it.
Meanwhile, Councillor Arnold has a question.
Oh, sorry. I want to start with button while Paul's trying to find that. I think the question was, do the dwellings meet the nationally prescribed standards in terms of space?
Yeah.
And I would be confident from the dimensions that have been quoted that we're well in excess of those. And I think my colleague can compare. So, Paul, you might want to sort of just.
I believe that they do. I mean, the only ones that we are actually required to meet, our policy requires us to meet the nationally described space standards for the two bedroom dwellings. We're not actually, the policy says only requires it for the smaller dwellings rather than the larger ones. The standards go beyond that. But I was just hoping to find the document so I could quote to you what the standards actually are. That's what I'm just trying to do.
Can I ask Paul another question?
Everybody's trying to find that out. So.
Yeah, just what was the decision behind the build form going from 2 to 3 to 4? How did that come about?
I'll help you in a minute.
Sorry?
I'll help you in a minute.
Okay.
Are we getting there, Paul, or shall we just move on?
Yeah.
I think
I've actually got it now, and I can't open it.
Okay. Let's go to Ken's question, and we'll come back if we can.
Yeah. So there's a question about the increase in number of units.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, really, we've had to assess what's before us. I can't really speak for the developer and why they've tried, why they're intending to increase the number, but we have to make a full assessment of that, and that's what we've done. And in spite of the increase in units, we nonetheless find that still to be acceptable and to not have introduced any further problems that would lead us to refusing or recommending refusal for different reasons. Right, I've finally got the information in front of me now. So for a 2-storey dwelling, 2-bedroom, it's and how many persons is it? 7. I've got 2 figures, 70 and 79 square meters are the two. So I'm fairly confident that complies with those.
We're getting bogged down down. Sorry. All right. Let's move on, Paul. Councillor Arnold's got a question.
Yeah, I've got 2 or 3 questions. Paul, can we just confirm that obviously Henley and Harpsden have a neighbourhood plan and they only need a 3-year land supply rather than a 5-year land supply that was mentioned by Tom Buckley, the town councillor?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, the supply situation doesn't really come into this, because it would only really be something we'd have to give consideration to if we were saying that the proposal didn't comply with policies, and what officers are saying here is that we believe it does. So therefore that you don't have to consider the 5-year or 3-year supply situation.
I was just trying to clarify the statement, that was all. Can I just go to the history of this site? I've been looking through it today. The first application for 2 houses was refused by this council. Went to appeal, they won the appeal for the 2 houses. And then come along the application for 3 houses, which was turned down by this council, and it went to appeal, and the appeal was dismissed. You haven't mentioned any of this in your report, but just reading on the overall balance and conclusion that came from the inspector, item 23, it said, I found that the proposal would comply with policies DES 1, SES 2 of the local plan and policy SD3 of the joint Henley and Harpston plan 2022, which I think is questionable. However, I found conflict with policy DES 6 of the local plan by virtue of the harm to the living conditions of occupants of 35 Reading Road that seem to be selling their land now, with respect to the privacy. Therefore, the proposal would conflict with the development plan as a whole. Did you take that into consideration when you came up with your report for approval?
Yeah, well, absolutely, because if you go to paragraph 7.12, that really is the part of the report that discusses the elements that the inspector had an issue with last time. With the previous proposal for 3, when council refused it, we had a few issues. We had issues of visual impact, and we had more than one neighbour impact that we were concerned about, and the inspector only really focused in on one of those, which was the garden depths and the overlooking to the rear. So what this proposal does is it increases the depth of the garden and effectively addresses that overlooking issue by bringing the current proposal within the standard. Therefore, now what you're looking at it is that the way of looking at it is it does comply with the development plan as a whole, because we're not officers are saying that it doesn't conflict with any of our policies.
Okay, well, let's just go on then, item 25 on that, from the inspector, where it said, in these circumstances, even if the tilted balance at paragraph 11D of the framework were engaged, the adverse impacts of granting plan permission would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Now, that's for 3 properties, but we're looking at 4 here. You know, I could understand maybe 3, they'd come back with more land or come over, but I can't see how they've now gone for 4 properties. When you've got statements like that made by the inspector, it doesn't make any sense to me anyway.
Yeah, the context of that was that at that time, the council was saying that it had a 5-year supply of housing, and in any event in Henley it was a 3-year supply of housing, and it was the applicant or appellant at that time that was saying that the inspector should take account of the tilted balance. So their argument was that on the one hand they felt that it complied with policy and we should be granting planning permission, but even if that wasn't the case, they then were saying that the tilted balance should apply, and the inspector should give more weight to the lack of 5-year supply and grant planning permission anyway. And the inspector basically dismissed both of those. He found harm with the scheme, and he also felt that it wouldn't, even if there wasn't a supply of housing, he wouldn't grant permission anyway. It wouldn't be enough, carry enough weight. So that's what that discussion is about. And if you like, neither in officers' view, neither of those come into play, because firstly, we're saying it now complies with policy, and secondly, so therefore you don't move on to have a look at the tilted balance, because that's which again we would be saying the same thing. We'd be saying that it doesn't apply here anyway, because we've got the 3-year supply.
I thought you previously said we weren't going to talk about 3-year supplies or 5-year supplies, but let's just move. One last question then. On policy DES 6, residential amenity. Now, at the moment, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm not wrong. That piece of land is a car park, and that's a fact. So, item 1(2) on DES 6, it states that it would affect the dominance or visual intrusion. Now, if you've got nothing there, and then you've put 4 houses there, surely it then becomes dominance or visual intrusion.
Well, I think it's a case really. It's, again, we're going back in time to the original planning application that came in for the 2 houses, and I think I remember that well. And we officers had concerns about the impact of those houses on the street scene. However, when it went to appeal, the inspector felt otherwise and granted, allowed the appeal and granted planning permission. So, and because that planning permission has been commenced, it's a relevant fallback position, and officers have to have regard to that, as did the inspector in the previous appeal when he was looking at the visual impact.
Just finally, I'm not talking about the first appeal, I'm talking about the second appeal, and that was refused on DES 6, which I've just referred to. Anyway, should we leave it there?
Can I come in on that, Chair? Yeah, just briefly, in terms of DES 6, it was only refused on the part of DES 6 that relates to privacy. So the inspector was happy that it was acceptable in terms of outlook and those elements, and only refused on number 305 because of the windows and on the back of the terrace and how close they were to the garden of 305. So that was the part of DES 6 that they're referring to.
Well, I just come back on that, but in the inspections report, so therefore the proposal would conflict with the development plan as a whole, not on just one aspect.
Well, the development plan includes every policy in the development plan. When you assess an application, you look at the development plan as a whole. So the inspector, because it fell down on part of policy DES 6 in relation to the impact, then when you take the development plan as a whole, it failed.
Can I just check?
Okay, are you still on questions?
On a question, yeah.
Yeah. Got to be still there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's still
there, Paul. So if
go back.
If they fall back, if we refuse and they fall back on the extant permission, which is 2 houses, in terms of housing need for Henley, where does that? Because I suspect this is more what's needed in Henley. So how will that sit with regards to the SHMA, the two houses versus the 4 houses?
I think that's obvious.
Yeah.
Well,
we'll look at what's in front of us.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. I'm not sure where we're going with that one, are we? Okay. Is there any more questions for Paul? I've seen on. So thank you very much, Paul. Right. We've heard from our speakers. We've talked to the planning officer. I'm now looking for a proposal. Councillor Dragonetti.
I would propose that we follow officer's recommendation.
Officer's recommendation for approval. Is that seconded? Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Yeah, okay. Right. Who wants to speak? Do you want to speak, Chris? Keith won't work. You wish to speak now?
I won't.
You won't?
I won't. I'll wait.
You'll wait. Okay. All right. Well, I'll prefer debate then. There is no debate.
There is no debate.
Yep, Councillor.
I'll just speak briefly on this. 2 houses were turned down. Two houses were turned down by this council. They were approved on appeal, which we accept them. And if they wish to build, then go ahead and do it. They went for 3 and got dismissed. Some of these items put forward tonight may well help with 3 houses, but I just can't understand why they've gone for 4 with reason for refusal as before, which I've laid out tonight. I still believe it's against the policy DES 6, and I also believe it's against the joint Henley and Hertfordshire policy, which is SD3. When it says development proposal should have regard to the importance of responding to creativity to, and where practical, enhancing. Now, how that can enhance something that there's nothing there, I just can't understand it. It just baffles me. So if I then go back to the three, okay, with three, there may be a couple of items put in this application tonight, which we could probably support three. But hell, I just can't understand going for four. I could understand going for three and I would have probably supported that. But I can't see where it's gone that far. And as I've said earlier, you know, 305, 307, 309 are selling their land off. Well, of course they're not going to object to it, but they're not going to live there forever. You know, someone else is going to have to come and live in those houses eventually, and they're going to have to look at what's being proposed there. And this is why I have a problem with this application tonight. So yeah, if they'd have come back for three, I would have probably supported it, but I definitely can't go for four. It just doesn't make sense.
Councillor. Okay. I'll let Councillor James Lorry speak.
I do feel that four is too much. It does seem that they have tried to cram as much in. And I actually disagree with Ken over the idea that three would be a decent amount. I think two in that space would have been what was required. Councillor Arlett does have a point that the people in those gardens will not be there forever, but you would move into those houses knowing that you had a reduced garden. I do feel, however, that with four houses, it is too cramped and is just overdevelopment for the sake of overdeveloping.
Okay. Councillor Heritage.
I would just suggest that whilst I very much do appreciate those points, I think we need to look at the fallback position and whether that would be considered to be more desirable or less desirable than what's in front of us now. On that basis, I would probably go for what's being presented now, because there were issues with that position which were only countered by an appeal. That position was rejected by planning committee, but that's what would happen if we reject this.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Oh, you want to go back a second there?
Have a quick say of these. What's in front of us is it's very interesting now how many houses were there before and whether they got through or not, but it's four houses in front of us at the moment. Looking at the residential amenity, they're slightly compromised on a couple of them, but there are other reasons why in this situation that's satisfactory. The officers made it quite clear it's compliant with all conditions now and not been in the past. So there's actually no reason for refusal, as far as I can see, based on what we have in front of us now. And that's the reason why I've gone off to the recommendation, really.
Okay, thank you. Lost track of who made the proposal in the first time. You made the proposal, sorry. Yes, so if the debate's over, we'll go back to Councillor Dragon.
Yeah, there's a bit of a history on this site, but the point is that those three dwellings that we some members of this committee seem to favour. There's one 2-bed, one 3-bed, and one 4-bed. So there's a 4-bed house amongst those three, and now we're getting 2 2-beds and 2 3-beds. So they're sort of, they're not the smaller houses, and they're meeting I would suggest they're meeting greater need than the 4-bed house. That's why I would support this recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So we have debated it, we've proposed it, seconded it. We'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation for approval, please show.
7, Chair.
7. Okay, thank you. Against? 2 abstentions. Okay. All right, it doesn't matter. It is fast.
He's not silent, is he?
Thank you. He's gone silent. Yeah, he's there. I think that's a first.
I need to conserve my energy.
That's a first. Actually, Ken Arlett was silent. Please note that. So, okay, we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is the Old Vicarage Church Lane Shift Lane. And now then, did Mark make it? Chloe's there.
Hello.
We can hear you and see you, but you're not alive.
Oh no, hello, I'm here. Yeah, not feeling very well, so
We will stop moving.
sorry.
It's like in his fifth.
Don't worry about it. That's better.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Chair. Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. This application seeks planning permission to demolish and replace the existing dwelling and ancillary structures. Planning permission was granted last year for extensions and alterations to the existing property. What is currently proposed would involve the replacement dwelling looking the exact same to the already approved extensions and alteration scheme that was approved last year. Put more simply, the proposed development before you this evening would result in the same form of a building being erected than that already approved last year. The benefits of the proposal would enable the property to be more energy efficient and would secure biodiversity net gain across the site. The Council's Heritage Officer objects to the proposed development, citing the loss of the building to be harmful given the history of the site and its historic association with the church and the village. Similar objections were originally raised by Shiplake Parish Council, who resist the loss of the heritage asset. Prior approval has recently been granted to demolish the dwelling and ancillary structures in question. The property is not listed, and as just mentioned, prior approval has already been granted to allow for the demolition of the property. As such, whilst it would be regrettable, the prior approval demolition must be given significant weight in establishing a fallback position in this instance. Officers do not consider the loss of the building and its associated history to form a strong material consideration in determining the outcome of this application. Since the publication of this committee agenda, Shiplake Parish Council have removed their objection to the loss of the building, citing the prior approval application as their reason to remove their objection. However, since this application was already on the agenda at the time of publishing, this application must still be heard and determined at Planning Committee. The main planning considerations have been detailed within the report before you, and officers are satisfied that planning permission can be granted for the proposed development subject to the conditions set out in section 11 of the report. In addition to the 10 conditions in front of you, I would like to add a condition which requires the development to be implemented in accordance with tree protection measures that need to be agreed by the local planning authority prior to the relevant development commencing. A previous condition was imposed on the site for tree protection measures to be implemented as submitted. However, the scheme before us is different to the previous scheme. So in sort of to be cautious, officers recommend that tree protection measures need to be agreed again. It is recommended that the planning committee support officers' recommendation to grant planning permission for the proposed development this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Right, so we do have Councillor Penrose on our list, but I'm
here, Chair.
You're there, okay. All right, so you have 5 minutes starting now.
Thank you, Chair. Shiplake Parish Council initially wanted this property to be updated in line with its previous application, which was approved P23 S1665. And we noted the 72-page heritage statement that accompanied that application. We were very disappointed to subsequently, after that permission was granted, to find an application which sought to demolish the property and erect in its place a replica of this non-designated heritage asset. We note also the SODC's Heritage Officer's advice, which was not to demolish and rebuild. However, regardless of Shiplake Parish Council's strong opposition and the Heritage Officer's advice, SODC have approved demolition of this property, and so therefore has removed the option of remodelling the existing heritage non-designated heritage asset. I should tell you that this is the house that Tennyson stayed in on the night of his marriage. It is the site of the old vicarage with very strong associations with the the historic village of Shiplake, and is the setting for the 1897 history of Shiplake by Emily Clemenson. So a lot of opposition in the village for this to have been demolished. However, we acknowledge and understand that the demolition has been approved, and that rather removes our wiggle room to do anything about this. So we would request that officers, yes, do look at conditions, one of which is tree protection. This is a site with cedars of Lebanon and a number of protected trees, and we would request that these are very carefully monitored, and there is a tree protection plan. We would also ask that officers, if they should, and this committee, if they're minded to approve this plan, that the property is strictly built to the form of the existing main building. In addition, we note a number of residents of Shiplake and the parish council have noted the terrible state of Church Lane. And if this building is to be demolished, we would request that there's a condition that the removal of demolished building material takes place within the old vicarage land, which wasn't actually shown on Mark's map there. The old vicarage land extends all the way to the Reading Road, and we would request that any demolished material is removed using the old vicarage land, which leads directly to the Reading Road, not via the very bad state and make worse the very bad state of Church Lane. So yeah, so that's the situation of that Shiplake Parish Council finds itself in. We don't have very much to work with here, other than to request some conditions, I believe.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Penrose. Committee, has anybody got any questions for? No questions. So thank you very much for your time and your presentation. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Adrian Gould, who's the agent. Been waiting patiently there.
Thank you very much, Chairman, members of the committee. Notwithstanding the parish is no longer objecting, as you've heard, I would just like to make a few points, hopefully to assist your assessment of the proposal. As Mark has said, the first and most obvious point to make is that the loss of the existing dwelling house is something that's already been countenanced following the granting of demolition consent in February. I think it's also relevant to note that there's no in principle objection in regard to local plan or neighbourhood plan policies to the residential redevelopment of the site, or indeed to new infill development on the site, given that it's within the defined settlement boundary of Shiplake Cross as per the neighbourhood plan. Just some other points I think are helpful. There's a structural report that accompanied the application, and it makes clear that the existing dwelling is in need of extensive repairs and refurbishment, and that its floors, walls and ceilings are all poorly insulated, and concludes that the undertaking of those necessary works to bring it up to a modern standard would entail that little of the existing building would remain legible, and also that the cost of undertaking those works would potentially exceed the cost of demolition and rebuilding. The design of the house is, as Mark has said, identical to what was approved last July. Consequently, its relationship with the church, the Grade 2 St Peter's and Paul's Church, as a Grade 2 listed building, and other listed buildings nearby, would be unchanged, and that's obviously already been considered to be acceptable. The approved scheme also approved substantial works to the existing house, so removal of existing floors and ceilings to raise the ground floor level, the remodelling of the entirety of the north elevation, the removal of internal partitions and the form of the building throughout the building. It would remove the entirety of the western side and replace it with 2 and single-storey extensions. It would remove the entirety of the main roof. It would involve new windows being inserted on all sides of the building at raised levels and filling in of the existing apertures, and would create a new basement underneath the existing and the enlarged parts of the house. The fourth thing I'd like to mention is that in sustainability terms, unlike the extension proposal, the current proposal would need to be constructed to a far greater standard of energy and water efficiency, as required by policy DES 10. You'll know DES 10, it's the policy that requires energy carbon emissions reductions of up to 40%, of a minimum of 40% relative to 2013 building regs for new dwellings. In this particular instance, the reduction would be 58% relative to that baseline. And although it is a new build scheme, the proposal will also seek to utilise salvageable materials from the existing house and the outbuildings, rainwater goods, tiles, floorboards, architraves, etc. And demolished masonry and inert material would also be utilised on site as hardcore for the new buildings and surfaced areas. Finally, although the building has been identified as having local heritage interest, principally because of Lord Tennyson's, he was reported, as the previous speaker said, to have been a guest at the property prior to his marriage across the road in 1850. It's relevant to note that the house he would have known then bears little or no resemblance to how it appears today. This is owing to the fact the house was substantially extended and remodelled internally and externally in 1905.
You have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you very much. And was subject to further extensions and alterations in the 1960s. Therefore, in that context, and having regard to the further works of extension that have already been approved last year, the heritage assessment confirms that the main house would have a low local heritage value overall, and therefore would fall well short of the historic and architectural quality to be considered worthy for statutory listing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gould. Right, have we got any questions? I have one, because Councillor Penrose talked about removing the waste manure or not using Church Lane. Is that at all possible?
It is possible. Just on the comments of with regards to so that would be fine if there was a condition saying that the existing access, which is right at the top of Church Lane, is utilised. That would be acceptable. The new entrance that's approved has previously been approved and is also as part of this application. Again, if that were the committee's preference, that would only be brought into use following the completion of the development. If that was considered to be appropriate, we are, as far as the state of the road is, the lane is concerned, there's a lot of indiscriminate parking along there, as local people will know. For people who are resident in the boats on the river further down the lane there.
Yeah.
So there's indiscriminate parking. The wall, which part of the wall, which was single brick at the old vicarage, has recently been removed and has got hoardings up by way of replacement because of its condition. So, my client is aware of the sensitivity about the lane, is happy to do what is required if it's the committee's wish to use the main entrance only at this point.
I'm sure Mark is listening to that and will take note. Sure. Councillor Bernard, you have a question?
Just a quick one. I think there's more building reg story than planning, but by having a new build, that means you can put in new modern radon mitigation if you need it, rather than what was already there.
Sure. Well,
looking at the radon map here.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Well, certainly as far as it's obviously difficult to retrofit. It's also it's VAT rated as well. If you're trying to extend and alter existing buildings at 20%, which is still baffles me, I'll be honest. Yeah, it's an opportunity not only with that, but also to significantly enhance the sustainability credentials of the home.
Okay, Councillor Gordon Green, and I'll come back to it.
Could I just check that if you do use the exit to the main road instead of Church Lane, will that then need some ecology mitigation? Because I don't know from the site picture where that exit is with regards to sensitive ecological areas, of which there's quite a few, it seems.
There's obviously already an existing trackway there, so there's no obvious reason why anything that exists today would have to be removed to facilitate that, because there is already largish vehicles into the site through that entrance. If there is a problem, obviously we could maybe discuss that with the officers as well. If there's any occasion that something else needs to be done. But
I'm sure that there needs to be a conversation with the planning officer just to ensure that we're all understanding. I think he's showing the track there across the thing, and the entrance is over on the right hand side.
It is, yeah.
Peculiar, yeah. Yeah, the entrance is there. Oops. Well, it would be if Tom could keep his mouth still. Yeah. So could you just show us where the new entrance will be, which will not be used?
Was that question for me?
Yes, please. Yes.
Sorry.
Go back to that one.
Yeah, there it is. So where the red dot,
zoom out a bit.
Sorry, it helps. That's the new entrance. So that was the original entrance to the property back in historically. It was closed up in the 60s or 70s, I think, when the new entrance was put in, which is closer to the top of Church Lane. So.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Are there any further questions?
Yeah,
Councillor Dragon.
On the illustrations of the elevations,
yeah,
I'm interested and used to see the extraordinary number of chimneys that are being provided. Are these really going to be functional chimneys, or are they purely cosmetic?
The honest answer is I don't know. I think they're certainly shown as with chimney places and parts on the floor plan. So, but I think in sometimes there are occasions where even if they're not functional, they still add to the character of the building. So. So I don't know if it would make a difference in any event.
Yeah, I
don't think I don't think we're looking at.
Sorry, Councillor Katie Ray, you had a question.
I understand what you said about the costs of renovation as opposed to the cost of rebuilding, and I agree entirely that the VAT on renovation should be changed. It's ridiculous. Yeah. However, it's not just the cost in money terms, it costs in emissions and pollutants and carbon emissions in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Royal Institute of British Architects has actually come out and said actually it's always better to renovate rather than demolish and rebuild. Yeah. I don't know if you've taken that into account.
So I think the reality is there's an awful lot of changes that have already been approved. So internally, floors and ceilings will go. The whole roof structure will go. I suppose the point is there won't be an awful lot left to implement the scheme that's already been approved, with the wall changes as well. So one whole side of the building goes and is demolished as per the approved scheme. Then there's new openings put into every other elevation. But it is a fact. Obviously, there is embodied energy in that. We would be looking to try and utilise materials, as I mentioned in the presentation. But in the longer term, the benefits of having a new, highly sustainable, energy and water efficient building is the payoff as we assess it. So.
Okay, so you're saying you think it's the payoff, but you haven't assessed it in terms of actually getting it sort of measured
No,
carbon emissions.
no, it's not a requirement of the policy.
It's not
over
right there,
there.
it's not a requirement, but just,
But it
and I
is.
acknowledge you're saying you're
Yeah.
going to recycle the
Yeah.
hardcore and all that sort of stuff. But,
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Gould. Thank you very much. We don't appear to have any of the local members with us who are wanting to talk, so we'll go questions back to Mark Pullen. Mark, you with us?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Yeah. Did you follow that conversation on the access and
I did, yes, and I'm happy to put a condition in effect of construction sort of means of entering and exiting the site via the access at the top rather than off Church Lane. So I'm happy to add that.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's that covered. Right, any further questions? Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, Mark, could you help me on 4.0 relevant planning history? Obviously, the permission's been given to demolish the property. Was that permission granted before the heritage officer gave his view?
No, so the heritage officer provided their comments and then the prior approval application came in. So their comments are before the demolition consent was granted. So as means of sort of a chronology for you. So
non-designated.
Strange.
Any further questions? No, I think we're all content, Mark. So thank you very much for your presentation and your report. And I'll let you get back to your sunny aspect, wherever it is. Penthouse is gone. Yeah. Okay, committee. I'll give her a proposal, I suppose. Councillor MacDonald.
Yes, I'll go off this proposal on this.
Thank you. That's seconded by Councillor James Lorry. Right, do you wish to speak now or wait for the debate?
I'll speak now, if that's okay. As the architect said, it's a historical building.
You know, would have, if it hadn't have been given for demolition, I would have probably voted against this. And I can understand where Chris Penrose is coming from Chiplake as well, Chiplake Parish Council. You know, their observation was for refusal, but as soon as they found out that there was demolition consent, they lifted it. They've got nowhere to go because once it's demolished, somebody's going to have to take its place. And I just wonder why we've got a heritage officer. If we're not going to listen to him, him or her, I don't know if it's him or her.
Yeah,
but I think some comments in there, in where he or her objects, were probably reasons for refusal. I really do, but I don't think we've got anywhere else to do is to support the officer's recommendation for approval.
Yeah, okay. I think we'll.
I think Paul's actually going to make the point about.
I'll just share, if I can just clarify the demolition side of things. So that wasn't, the heritage officer objected, he didn't want to see the loss of the building, but the loss of the building, the demolition is permitted development, so we have very little control over that. So it comes under permitted development. The only things we can consider under that class of permitted development are the method of demolition and the restoration of the site. So we can't consider the principle of demolition. So despite the heritage officer's concerns, we had no reason to well, we couldn't resist the demolition of it.
But perhaps we're all in between a rock and hard place.
Yeah, it's a non-designated building, so that was the situation. If it had been a listed building, then it'd been different. It's not, and that's the whole point. Yeah, okay, sorry, we're in debate. Councillor.
I just wanted to clarify that not only are we going to request the change of exit and removal of materials, but can we please have that consultation with the ecology officer?
I'm sure Mark will do that. Yeah.
And I also noted that they've gone for a minimum of 2 black boxes, and I just wonder if we could add a couple of owl boxes and swift boxes.
I don't think we can at this point.
No,
No. Okay. Councillor Heritage, do I speak?
Actually, I've got very, very little to say really. That I concur. I agree with my fellow councillors that the demolition permission is in place, and therefore, as long as the access conditions are included, that's where we're going. That's where I'm going.
Yeah, I just want to request that we consider the requests of the parish council around the trees and cedar 11, etc., and make sure that they're all protected as far as possible. Well, completely protected.
I think everything's in place for that.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Dragonis.
I would say there was in the attached to planning application was 70 pages of the structural report on the existing dwelling, and I don't know if anybody else had a look at it, but it's actually horrendous. If you ever walk to a house and saw all of those things that were wrong with this existing one, you'd be running screaming for demolition order. Everything from everywhere is a nightmare. So I can understand why the applicant first of all tried to put an application in to approve it, and then decided it was all beyond anything. Yeah.
Actually, was your proposal, was it?
Yeah, I agree with the councillors here. Councillor Arnott, it's already got demolition on it. Hopefully the new structure will be fit for 150 to 200 years. It'll be more economical and sustainable to run, and will save the trees and Church Lane in the process of its construction too. So I haven't got anything else to add.
Yeah, okay, all right, we'll do the vote. All those in favour, please show. That is unanimous. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, committee. That's the end of the meeting.
Susie, please can we end the broadcast?